Hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. This video is going to be going over the basics of React. We are going to be tweaking our default page. We're going to be installing them. We're going to be uploading to Google Cloud. Now, one thing before we get started, I'm going to swap over to my other screen here. Um, this is assuming that you have React installed. So I've got some links in the description below for how to install it for your various systems. Again, I'm using Windows with the subsystem for Linux installed. You might be seeing me use VS Code here. Might be the first time, depending on where this video falls, but I've become very happy with VS Code lately. I've got my Ubuntu terminal down here. I could use PowerShell, I could use Git Bash, CMD, any option that I wanted here. I've got all my source files are going to be up here. I can use Vim, I can add any kind of plugin that I want, and it's just an utter delight. But this assumes that you have, npm, React, Yarn, whatever, kind of module installer that you're going to prefer up and running for you. But again, I'm going to assume that you can kind of manage the installation bits on your own because, again, I'm using Windows, you might be using Mac, you might be using Linux, maybe using Raspberry Pi, who knows. But we need to basically have a development environment set up locally on our own machines. Now, you could do this up in Google Cloud, right? I mean, you could set up the React libraries, everything that you need up there, but it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to build on your own machines and a lot cheaper too, right? So I already have npm node, or sorry, I've already got node, npm, npx, yarn, all of these things installed that we're going to eventually need. And how do you know if you have it installed? Well, assuming you followed the guide, I can run npx create react app demo 658 2. And I've already got another project called demo 658, just not feeling super creative today. So I'll create the -2 variant. And what this is going to do is this is going to create a default React application with all the bells and whistles that we need to get the standard hello world installed for React that you would, ideally then take and extend to whatever you needed. Now, what's happening here is it's installing all of the packages necessary to really bootstrap a React application. We're going to see there are a lot of them. Over time, you can kind of wean those down if your file size is too big, but basically it's installing a whole bunch of things, and this usually takes a handful of minutes to get up and running. But I will be back in a few moments as soon as these things are done installing. All right, all done installing. So what we see, if we kind of scrub through what actually happened, we added 1,416 packages. Some of them are looking for funding, if you have some spare cash laying around. We initialized a Git repository for the project, which we will come back to. And we have some with high security vulnerabilities. So if you're comfortable with Node.js, if you're comfortable with package management, you could update those. Be aware that updating package versions may cause things to break. So depending on your package, it's kind of, usually it's worth it to fix security updates. But if your application relies on a specific version, that may introduce some breaking possibilities to your app. Just something to kind of keep in mind, okay? You don't necessarily have to fix them. You could audit it to see what's going on. Right. Then we get some information about how to start the server, how to build the application, how to run test scripts, things of that nature. Okay, so let's start with the Git repository bit since we haven't talked about Git whatsoever, and we're really not going to go too deep into that. Git is a way to handle version control. Highly recommend you all get comfortable with it if you are not already. But the nice thing about installing a React application this way is that we get a Git repository by default. Everything is under version control already. So I can make changes to my code. I can check them into my local Git repo, and now I've got a new version. If I screwed something up royally, I could go back to the previous version if I wanted to. Again, that involves you understanding how Git works and how to commit and things like that. Just to kind of show you, if I do an ls dash, actually, sorry, I've got to go into the directory that I just built, then ls-la, I see this .git folder. I see a .git ignore file. Refresh you. Git ignore is basically a way to tell Git to ignore a whole bunch of temporary files, ignore the modules, basically things that you do not want to include in your version control. But really the .git folder is where all of your version control happens. And it kind of tracks everything. I don't recommend going in there and playing with it unless you know what you're doing because it's very easy to break the repository. But that's kind of where the magic happens. And if you want to link it up to, say, something like GitHub, you could add that as a remote, and then any change that you make locally could be pushed to a remote server. It could work on a team in this type of a situation. Again, very useful to get into. We have a Git repository by default. We're not really going to use it right now, but it's there for you if you want. Okay, so some other things that we've got in here. So we've got this node modules folder. This is where all of your packages or modules are going to be installed for your project. And as you can kind of scroll through it, there are quite a lot of them by default. You don't need all of them, but they're kind of there. And something that's always fun to do for me is to run or check how large that folder is. So du-sh node modules. Du is the Linux command for getting file size, and we're going to get it in human readable format. This is 272 megabytes of space just in modules. Now, they're not all going to be packaged up and sent to your production build, by the way. They're just there to help your development environment along. Some of them will be exported, but just something to kind of keep in mind if you're short on disk space. Okay, so we have that. We're not going to touch this really right now. We have the public folder, which is basically going to be all of our HTML code that we'll be building around all of our assets, images, scripts, things of that nature, which are not a direct part of the React code proper. One thing that's going to be important in here, our HTML file is going to need to have a div called with the idea of root. And you get some information actually here about the purpose of this file as well if you want to kind of read through this. But kind of the preview is that this div is where all of your React content is going to be placed. What's going to happen later on, we are going to get this particular element by ID, and it's looking for root, and everything that React builds is going to be shoved inside of this div. Okay, that's kind of the structure of our program. You can tweak this if you don't like root, but you just have to make sure you reflect that ID throughout. Okay, but enough about index. Let's look at the actual React code itself. Now, in the SRC folder is where we're going to be editing all of the React specific components. So we have some style sheet information. App.js is going to be our default component that we use. We'll get back into this in a moment. We have some test scripts, and then some other things in here too. So index.js, this is going to be kind of your main file in a way. This is the point of entry. We're going to do the majority of our imports in here. We see that we are importing our app component specifically. That's important because we need to access this thing. All right. We're going to get a reference to the root div that I showed you a few moments ago. And basically, we're going to take this and render out the app component. Now, what's the app component? Well, it looks like this HTML-ish tag here, right? So it looks like one of those tags where we don't have the closing tag. We just kind of add it with a slash inside to close it off by itself. What this is doing is we are specifying to React that we want whatever the code that is inside of app be placed inside of this root element. Okay, and you'll kind of get a feel for how this all links up together as you go. One thing I will say, you don't need only app. You could have more than one. You could define all of your code in here if you didn't want to break the files apart. Just kind of depends on what your preference is. By default, it's typically best practice to split up your components into their own files. Kind of like in Java or C# when you have one class per file, and that class is the name of that file, right? So what is app.js then? Well, we're going to grab a logo. We're going to grab a CSS file. Again, it looks a little bit different from how we would import images and style sheets from other languages, right? But it's weird, my little green dot kind of jumped. We're going to define a function called app. It's going to match the name of the file here. We are going to export it at the bottom, meaning that other aspects of our application can import it. But all we're really doing in here, by default anyway, is to return a div, a header, an image, a paragraph tag, a hyperlink, close the header, close the div. That's what we are returning here, okay? So it looks like we're returning HTML code, right? This is what's going to be taken, translated to HTML, and then put on the page. Obviously, we have some kind of templating languages in here. Looks like it's straight HTML. It is very particular about the syntax, though. For instance, if I got rid of this closing div, it would get very angry with me and probably break. You have to be very, very careful with your syntax. And at minimum, you need at least the one div in here. Otherwise, again, it's going to be very unhappy with you. Okay, so let's take a look and see what this actually is doing. So I'm going to run npm start. This creates a local development server that will have live reloading, meaning that I can make any change I want to the source code, and it's going to automatically rebuild itself, and you're going to see the changes pretty much immediately. Okay, so we say, hey, you can access this via localhost port 3000. You can tell React to run on different ports. However, we are going to just run on the default for now because 3000 is fine for me. All right, so let's shove you over here, please. I need something that's not clickable. There we go. Make you a touch smaller. And I guess let's get rid of this. So we see our default page, right? So here's the logo right here. Here's edit source app.js. You see that right here. Here's the link, and life is good. I could, let's say, add in a div here. Hello there, CIS658. And I save. We see that things rebuild down here. Immediately pops up in my development environment. Kind of nifty. Okay. We could, let's see. Okay. Sorry for the weird cut. I made a funny typo and it just broke everything. We could get rid of this closing div here and see what happens. Oops, need that closing div, right? I just told you it was going to get very mad at you. Actually, no, let's go back here. We see a big error message on the page. This is probably worth looking at because I'm sure you're all going to make a mistake at some point. Okay, module build failed, syntax error, unterminated JSX contents. I said this is HTML-like or JavaScript-like. We're actually rendering JSX, which requires that every opening tag have a closing tag. So let's put that, let's put that div back and auto format, and it's back. What if we get rid of the header? Still doesn't like it. Okay, it's not just the div, it's any element. All right, link just takes us to the React page, which is fine. But we have a local development server. Okay, things are running live. We're happy. Let's say this is the application we want. I'm going to stop the server. If I were to refresh this, it would go away. All right, which makes sense, right? The server stopped. We don't want it to just run forever in development mode, right? So we want to actually build this thing. So if we look at our folders here, right? So public is where all of our templating information is, all of our assets are. We want to package everything up into a build. We're going to run npm run build. Okay, and what this will do is if you don't already have one, it's going to create a build folder in your project workspace, and all of your ready to deploy HTML, CSS, JavaScript assets are going to be kind of placed where they should be. Now this should pop up in here. We see some kind of similar things that you see in the public folder here, but we have static files. So here's some media. We see some JavaScript files that we need, cascading style sheets. Their index page is a lot less pretty. Basically everything is minified, right? But we have this kind of page that we can run. Now I'm going to, let's pop this open now. I've got this page here. Yes, thank you. I know I need to enable JavaScript. I'm going to go ahead and pop this open and oops, nothing's working, right? So even if I ran this with, say, the live server. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, open with live server. This is an extension that I've added into my VS Code to give me a local web environment. It's still not going to work. So we have some tweaks to make to have this be production ready. Now it does say that we can add a local static server. So we get some instructions for how to do that. So let's do npm install -g serve. Okay, so we're adding our first package. How exciting. And this doesn't take too long. Oops, I don't have access to do that. I forgot -g is system-wide. So we need to run this with sudo or admin privileges if you're running PowerShell. All right, so we have a new package in there, and I can run, what was the code again, just for your purpose? Serve-s build. So serve-s build. Okay, so we are now running a local web server on port 3000. So localhost 3000. You can't see this yet because I need to move it over, but basically it's doing the same kind of a server that we saw before. Just now, instead of doing npm start, I did npm run build, and then I did serve-s build, basically serve the content in the build directory. All right, looks fine, but again, nobody else can see this, right? So we want to stop this. I would say just do that if you want to test things out to make sure it works. Okay, so make sure I'm not forgetting anything before we jump ahead. All right, so got everything. Everybody good? Awesome. Again, the talking to yourself is perfectly normal. Don't worry about that. Okay, so I'm going to head over now to Google Cloud, and we are going to serve this content up on the internet. So I'm going to SSH into, this is a micro instance that I have. I've got a LAMP stack installed. Nothing fancy though, just basic web server. I'm going to grab the IP address here. And basic page, nothing too exciting. Once we get in, go ahead and do this. Right. Okay, so cd var www.html ls, nothing too exciting in here, right? Basic application. Clear cd tilde, go back to our root of our personal account. Okay, so I now need to figure out how to get this file or this code up to here. And again, there are multiple ways we could do this. The easiest way, I think, again, you could figure out a different way to do this if you want. I know some people might create a Git repository, push the files to Git, pull them onto Google Cloud. Some people might, there's multiple ways. I'm just going to make a archive, upload it, unarchive it, put it into the web directory. Okay. Basically, what I'm going to do here. So I guess maybe one thing we could show. So let's take a look here. I could just say, right-click build, add to build.zip. And then when I bring it up on the internet, I just unzip it up there. With Ubuntu, you might need to install the unzip package. Is unzip installed by default? Nope. So you just have to do sudo apt install unzip. Let's do that while we're waiting. I'll show you both ways. Unzip. Okay, so I'm going to say right click, and I've got 7-zip installed. Whatever your archiver of choice is going to work just fine. But there's my build.zip. Okay, I'm going to say, so I'm going to be in Linux land here. So I want this build folder to be an archive. So tar-ccvf build.tar.gz, and then I want the build directory. Okay, so now I've got a gzipped and tarred archive of my build folder. I also have the zip one. Let's go ahead and upload both of them. Choose files. Cut that out. Choose files. Cut that out. Okay, I've got a shortcut to my Linux directory again. Your mileage may vary with respect to where your stuff is. I've got build.tar.gz, build.zip. You only need one of these. Again, I'm showing both of them. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and upload. We see them going up. I do an ls. Here are my 2 folders. All right. So let's unzip build.zip. Okay. And we see that it took everything that I built and shoved it into the build directory because that's how that works. All right. So I'm going to say, we'll leave this for now. ls. We'll come back to tar.gz. Sudo mv build /var/www/html. Now I'm going to call this the exact same thing, 658, or sorry, demo-658-2. Now I'm doing a little shortcut here. You don't necessarily have to do this. I'm moving my build directory to a new folder name. So basically I'm doing a cut, paste, rename all in one with this MV. I could just move it into the HTML directory and then rename it. I'm going to do it all at once. Maybe I will show you the other way with the tar.gz file. So now if I look at /var www.html, I see this demo 658.2 folder, which is going to have all my built content. Okay. So again, we need super user access unless you've given yourself permission to move things to var www.html. I have this named very specifically to be the name of my application. Again, we will come back to that as to why. But now I'm going to refresh my web server. Still should be the same. /658 demo-2. And I'm going to get an error. Nope. Well, I'm going to get an error anyway. Demo 658-2. Transpose the words. All right, so I'm going to see a blank page. And I'm going to pop open my dev tools because I'm a good web developer and I check them first. Hey, there's a whole bunch of things that were not found. So it can't find the JavaScript files it built, can't find the CSS, so it can't find any of the assets whatsoever. Okay, this is because we built it and we put it inside of a folder. React by default is going to assume it's the only thing that exists ever, and all of the files are in the root of the file system, meaning that they are in the root of the web directory. However, I put them into this folder because I want maybe more than one React application up and running. All right. So actually, we can do a quick check here. So let's go to var www.html. And you don't have to do this. I'm going to sudo mkdir backup. I'm going to move hello.html and index.html into backup. I do an ls, and I see just these two. Now I'm going to sudo we'll do mv, everything inside of demo 658.2 to my current location. All right, so again, some hot and ready Linux commands for you here. We're making a directory. I took my existing files, put them into backup because I didn't want to delete them. Okay. And then I moved everything inside of my demo 658-2 folder, so the asterisk means everything, into the current directory. All right, so if I do an ls now, I see index.html, all of the React stuff that I built. And the reason why I moved into the backup is this index.html would have been overwritten by this one because I said run this as a super user, and I'm not going to get a warning saying, hey, idiot, you're deleting your files. Probably would be nicer than that. Now when I run this, it's cached. So I do a hard refresh, Control-Shift-R for me, I see my React application working just fine. Okay, so if you are only ever running React on your server, don't worry about what we're going to do next. Just put it in the root of the Apache location. However, if you're like 99.99% of other web developers, you're going to have more than one thing running on your web server. Okay, and depending on how cute you are, maybe you build some virtual hosts for each separate application. You don't have to for this class anymore, but maybe you want to partition out your websites. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get rid of all of our, we're going to get rid of everything. So sudo rm, all of our .html, all of our .pngs, all of our .jsons. Let's get rid of demo 652, favicon, robots, and static. Okay, so now we just have this backup folder. And I'm going to go ahead and move everything in backup to my current location, just so things are back to where they were before. Okay, so there's my hello, there's my index. We can now safely get rid of this backup directory because I don't need it before. rm-rf backup. Be very careful with this command, by the way. Sudo rm-rf will delete a folder, everything inside of it. Make sure that you are deleting the correct thing. There is no coming back from a rm-rf. All right, refresh my homepage, back to this guy. Perfect. Hopefully I haven't lost anybody yet. Basically, I just wanted to show you how that will work. Now, actually, let's go back to this, get rid of all these files, because I'll just redo, I have to rebuild this anyway, so we'll come back to this. Nothing in my home directory, okay? So I have to go back to my local builds, all right? And we need to tweak something. So if I want this to exist inside of a folder, All right, I need to edit my package.json file, and I need to add a home page. And we're going to call this /658 demo2. Okay, so syntax, use your key in quotes, colon, value in quotes, comma. What this is telling React is that when you build it, preface every single link anywhere with a /658-demo-2. So when I create a 658-demo-2 folder in my Google Cloud environment, it needs to be inside of this location. You could call it whatever you want. You could call it assignment 14 or whatever, whatever number we're up to for homework. Put that in here. But basically, this has to match the folder that you are putting it into. Okay, so now npm run build. I'm going to go ahead and build things out. Sorry for the length of this video, by the way, but it's kind of worth going through all these little steps. Shouldn't take too long. Perfect. Okay, so now we have our build folder. Let's run this serve again just to show you. So this is running, and I run localhost 3000. Hey, that's not going to work, right? Again, it's looking for everything to be in that particular folder. Syntax error, even better. What's the syntax error? That's weird. Okay, well, we will come back to that, I guess. I'm a little concerned about a syntax error. I didn't mess anything up there. Alrighty, well, let's go ahead and just keep going. So I'm going to go ahead and tar-zcvf. I've got that memorized in my head. Demo. Okay, we'll just call this build again. Build.tar.gz, everything in the build directory. We're going to upload it again. Okay. This is build.tar.gz. Check the timestamp, make sure that's what I built. Upload. All right. Again, you could have used unzip if you prefer. tar-zxvf. X is the unzip, C is the archive and compress. Build. Same thing. We have all of our folders here, or files here. Sudo make dir var www.html demo-658-2. So I'm creating that directory that I need because I deleted it before. Sudo mv everything inside of build goes into var www.html demo. Put a dot just to make sure we don't overwrite the directory. And everything is now in there. Just to break down these commands, again, this is unzipping the tar.gz archive I created. Equivalent of unzip, well, not equivalent if you look at compression algorithms, but same thing, we're extracting. Okay, that all went into the build directory. I needed to make the directory that I'm looking for in my web folder because I got rid of it. I need to move everything inside of the build directory into that new folder. And now we see if there's a syntax error up on our website. This is demo. Good, it worked. I had a minor feeling in my gut that it was going to be broken and I'd have to spend an hour debugging it again. But now everything works. Okay, let's take a look at the source code here. So I am looking at, let's see, head. So it's okay, it's actually going to just reflect everything nicely. I was wondering, I couldn't remember if it was going to put this particular URL inside of here. It's just treating this folder as the root of this server. So everything is still looking like it's at the root, but now life is good. Just kind of babbling because I had this instinct that I broke something by accident. Okay, so two things to just kind of summarize there. If your React application is the only thing, don't worry about what I just did. If you are running multiple React applications or you are putting it into a folder, you're going to need to add that little homepage designator into your package.json file. Okay, so we have put this up on Google Cloud. Life is good. Okay, so this has been building React. This has been uploading to Google Cloud. Depending on how things go, you might be able to publish to GitHub pages as well. I will try to see if I can find another guide for that because It worked with Rails, or sorry, not Rails 6. It worked with React 17, but with React 18, I want to say some changes were made. So I will probably create a separate video on that one if I can get it working. Anyway, hope this was beneficial to you all. I will see you all in the next video. Bye, everybody.